A 3-year-old saw him alone at night. Her tiny gesture changed his life forever. The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan penthouse office, each drop racing down the glass like tears against the night sky. Marcus Chen sat hunched over his mahogany desk, the blue glow of 3 computer monitors casting shadows across his exhausted face. At 32, he had achieved what most could only dream of: a tech empire worth billions, properties spanning 3 continents, and a name that commanded respect in boardrooms around the world. Yet at 2 a.m, alone in his office, none of it seemed to matter. His neck ached from hours bent over financial reports. His eyes burned from staring at screens. His stomach growled, reminding him he'd forgotten dinner again. But Marcus had learned long ago to ignore these signals from his body. Pain was temporary. Success was permanent. That's what his father had drilled into him before the old man passed away, leaving Marcus an inheritance and a legacy of emotional distance that money couldn't measure. Marcus rubbed his temples, trying to massage away the headache that had been building since morning. The acquisition deal he'd been working on for 6 months was finally coming together, but every detail had to be perfect. Perfection was his standard, the only standard that mattered. He'd built his fortune on being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than everyone else. There was no room for weakness, no time for rest. His phone buzzed with another email. Then another. The world never stopped spinning, and neither could he. The penthouse where he both lived and worked had been featured in Architectural Digest, all clean lines, minimalist furniture, and artwork that cost more than most people's houses. But it felt less like a home and more like a museum. Beautiful, impressive, and utterly lifeless. The cleaning service came twice a week, leaving everything immaculate and untouched. Marcus usually ate takeout at his desk or attended business dinners where every conversation was a negotiation. He had acquaintances, not friends. Business partners, not companions. His last relationship had ended 2 years ago when his girlfriend finally admitted she felt like she was dating a ghost, someone who was physically present but emotionally absent. He'd wanted to argue, to defend himself, but deep down he knew she was right. He'd spent so many years building walls around his heart that he'd forgotten how to let anyone in. His mother had died when he was 12, and his father had responded by throwing himself even deeper into work, teaching Marcus by example that emotions were liabilities and attachments were weaknesses. Love made you vulnerable, and vulnerability led to pain. Better to pour everything into something you could control, like building an empire. Marcus glanced at the photo on his desk, the only personal item in the entire office. It showed him at age 10, standing between his parents at some beach vacation. His mother was laughing, her arms wrapped around him. His father stood stiffly to the side, already checking his watch. Marcus barely remembered that trip, but he remembered his mother's warmth, the way she'd always known when he needed a hug or a kind word. After she died, that warmth had vanished from his life completely. He pushed the thought away. Memories were distractions, and he didn't have time for distractions. His eyes drifted to the stack of documents waiting for his signature. Tomorrow he had meetings starting at 7 a.m. and running until 8 p.m. The day after would be the same. And the day after that. This was his life, an endless cycle of work, achievement, and solitude. Marcus stood up, intending to make himself another cup of coffee, but dizziness washed over him. When was the last time he'd slept more than 4 hours? He couldn't remember. He made it to the leather sofa near his desk and sat down heavily, telling himself he'd just close his eyes for 5 minutes. 5 minutes turned into sleep, deep, dreamless, and desperately needed. He didn't hear the cleaning crew arrive, as they did every Tuesday and Friday night. He didn't hear the quiet conversation in Spanish between the supervisor and the new woman she'd brought to help, a single mother who desperately needed the work. He didn't hear them move efficiently through the penthouse, dusting and vacuuming, being careful not to disturb the sleeping billionaire. And he didn't hear the soft patter of small feet when a 3-year-old girl, who'd been coloring quietly in the hallway while her mother worked, grew curious about the room with the big windows and the sleeping man. In his exhausted slumber, Marcus was unreachable, lost in the kind of sleep that comes when the body finally overrides the mind's protests. He'd pushed himself to the breaking point again, and his body had simply shut down. The office was silent except for the rain and his steady breathing. Outside, the city that never sleeps continued its restless dance. Taxis honking, sirens wailing, millions of people pursuing their own dreams and demons. But inside this particular room, time seemed to pause. Marcus slept on, unaware that his carefully controlled world was about to be changed by the gentlest of revolutions, a small hand, a tender heart, and a blanket that carried more love than all his billions could buy. Elena Rodriguez moved quietly through the penthouse, her practiced hands making quick work of dusting the bookshelves that lined the hallway. At 27, she'd learned to move through wealthy people's homes like a ghost, present but invisible, efficient but unobtrusive. This was only her third night on this particular job, and she was determined to prove herself worthy of it. The pay was better than her previous cleaning jobs, and the hours worked perfectly with her daughter Sophia's schedule. Her mother watched Sophia during the day while Elena worked at a diner, and then Elena would bring Sophia along on these night cleaning jobs, letting her color or play quietly in the hallways while Elena worked. It wasn't ideal, but it was survival. Since Sophia's father had walked out when she was still a baby, Elena had learned to make impossible situations work. "Mommy, I'm tired," Sophia whispered in Spanish, tugging on her mother's sleeve. The little girl's dark curls were coming loose from her ponytail, and she clutched her favorite blanket, a soft, worn thing that had once been bright pink but had faded to a gentle rose from countless washings. "Just a little longer, mi amor," Elena whispered back, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Why don't you sit by the big windows and look at the lights? You can count them like stars." Sophia's eyes lit up. She loved the city lights, how they sparkled like fallen constellations. "Okay, Mommy." Elena watched her daughter skip down the hallway, blanket trailing behind her like a cape. Sophia was the light of her life, a child so full of sweetness and wonder that she made every struggle worthwhile. Even on the hardest days, when the bills piled up and Elena's feet ached and exhaustion threatened to swallow her whole, one smile from Sophia made it all bearable. She turned back to her work, polishing a glass table until it gleamed. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chun, no relation to the owner, had warned her that Mr. Marcus Chun was particular about his space. Everything had to be perfect. Elena had seen rich people before, had cleaned their homes and learned their habits. Some were kind, treating her like a human being. Others looked through her as if she didn't exist. She wondered which type Marcus Chun would be, though in 3 nights, she'd barely caught a glimpse of him. 20 minutes later, Elena was vacuuming the master bedroom when she realized she hadn't heard Sophia's chatter in a while. A familiar flutter of maternal anxiety sparked in her chest. Sophia was generally well-behaved, but she was also curious and fearless, a combination that could lead to trouble. "Sophia?" Elena called softly, turning off the vacuum. No response. She moved quickly through the penthouse, checking each room. The living room, empty. The hallway, empty. The kitchen, empty. Her heart began to race. Then she noticed the door to the office was slightly ajar. Mrs. Chun had specifically said to save that room for last, to be extra quiet because Mr. Chun often worked late. Elena approached the door with growing dread. "Please," she prayed silently, "please let Sophia not have disturbed him." She peered into the office and her breath caught. There, in the dim light from the computer monitors, she saw Marcus Chun asleep on a leather sofa, his tall frame cramped and uncomfortable looking. And standing beside him, her tiny daughter was carefully draping her beloved pink blanket over his shoulders. "Sophia," Elena whispered urgently, rushing into the room. "Come here right now." But Sophia turned to her mother with the most serene expression, pressing a small finger to her lips. "Shh, Mommy. The man is sleeping." He looked cold. Elena's heart was hammering now. This could get her fired. Worse, it could get her in serious trouble. Rich people didn't like being touched by strangers, especially not while they slept. She grabbed Sophia's hand, ready to pull her away, but the little girl resisted. We have to let him sleep, Mommy, Sophia insisted in her tiny whisper. He works so hard. I saw all his papers. And he looks sad even when he's sleeping. Like he's having lonely dreams. Elena looked at the sleeping man more closely. Sophia was right. Even in sleep, Marcus Chen's face held tension, his brow slightly furrowed as if he carried his burdens into his dreams. The blanket, ridiculous and tiny against his broad shoulders, somehow made him look vulnerable rather than powerful. Come, mi vida, Elena whispered, scooping up Sophia. We need to go.
Now.
But Mommy, he needs. Now, Sophia. As Elena carried her daughter out of the office, Sophia looked back over her mother's shoulder at the sleeping man. Nobody should sleep alone and cold, she said quietly. That's what you always tell me. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Yes, she did always say that when Sophia woke from nightmares and climbed into her bed. Nobody should sleep alone and cold. But she'd been talking about the two of them, about their small family. She'd never imagined her daughter would extend that compassion to a stranger, especially not a billionaire who lived in a penthouse and probably had never been cold a day in his life. Back in the hallway, Elena set Sophia down and knelt to her eye level. Sweetheart, that was very kind of you. You have such a good heart. But we can't touch people's things or bother them when they're sleeping. Do you understand? Sophia's lower lip trembled. I just wanted to help. He looked like he needed someone to take care of him. I know, baby. I know. Elena pulled her daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. But sometimes grown-ups don't want help, even when they need it. Elena finished the cleaning job in record time, her nerves on edge. She kept expecting Marcus Chen to wake up, to storm out and demand to know what had happened, to fire her for allowing her daughter to touch him. But the office remained quiet. As they finally prepared to leave, Elena paused outside the office door. She couldn't resist one last look. Marcus Chen was still sleeping, Sophia's little blanket still draped across his shoulders, looking absurd and somehow deeply touching at the same time. In that moment, Elena saw him not as a billionaire or an employer, but as a person, tired, lonely, and perhaps just as desperate for warmth as anyone else. She quietly pulled the door closed and led Sophia home, never imagining that one small act of kindness had just planted a seed that would change all their lives forever. Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through his office windows and the strangest sensation of warmth around his shoulders. For a confused moment, he couldn't remember where he was or how he'd gotten there. His neck ached from the awkward angle he'd slept in, and his mouth tasted like stale coffee. Then he registered what was draped over him, a child's blanket, soft and worn, decorated with faded pink hearts and unicorns. He sat up abruptly, the blanket falling into his lap. What on earth? Marcus turned the blanket over in his hands, noting how thin it had become from years of washing, how one corner had been carefully repaired with mismatched thread. This was clearly loved, clearly precious to someone. But how had it ended up on him? He tried to reconstruct the previous night. He remembered sitting at his desk, reviewing contracts. He remembered feeling dizzy. He remembered lying down for just a moment. And then nothing until now. The cleaning crew. They must have come while he was asleep. But why would they leave a child's blanket on him? It made no sense. Marcus stood, his business mind immediately trying to solve this puzzle. He walked to his desk and pulled up the security system on his computer. The penthouse had cameras in all the common areas, though not in the bathrooms or bedrooms. He scrolled through the footage from the night before, fast-forwarding through hours of him working until he saw himself move to the sofa and fall asleep. Then, at 1:47 a.m., the cleaning crew arrived. He watched them move efficiently through the apartment. There were two women, one older, one younger. And then, a few minutes later, he saw something that made him pause the footage. A child. A little girl, no more than 3 or 4, with dark curls and wearing pink pajamas. Marcus zoomed in and watched as the child walked down the hallway, dragging a blanket behind her. She stopped at the door to his office and peered in. For a long moment, she just stood there, watching him sleep. Then she entered the room, moving with surprising purpose for someone so small. He watched, mesmerized, as she approached the sofa where he lay sleeping. She looked at him for a moment, her head tilted to one side, then carefully lifted her blanket and draped it over his shoulders. The gesture was so gentle, so deliberate, that something in Marcus's chest tightened. The younger woman, presumably the child's mother, rushed in moments later, clearly alarmed. But the little girl said something to her, and even though there was no audio, Marcus could see the tenderness in the exchange. The mother scooped up the child and left quickly, but the child looked back at him over her mother's shoulder, her small face filled with concern. Marcus replayed the footage 3 times, unable to look away from that moment when the little girl placed the blanket on him. There was something in her expression, pure compassion, utterly uncomplicated. She'd seen someone who looked cold and tired, and she'd tried to help. It was that simple. When was the last time anyone had done something like that for him? When was the last time anyone had looked at him and seen not a billionaire or a business opportunity, but just a person who might need care? He couldn't remember. Marcus sat back in his chair, still holding the blanket. It smelled faintly of strawberries and laundry detergent, clean and innocent. His thumb traced one of the faded unicorns, and he felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring in his chest. It took him a moment to identify it because it had been so long since he'd felt it. Gratitude. And something else. Something like longing. He shook his head, trying to clear it. This was ridiculous. He was being sentimental over a child's blanket. He should just have his assistant contact the cleaning company, return the blanket, and move on with his day. But he didn't. Instead, he folded the blanket carefully and placed it on his desk where he could see it. Throughout that day, Marcus found his thoughts drifting back to the little girl. During a board meeting where executives presented quarterly projections, he wondered what her name was. During a conference call with investors in Tokyo, he wondered if she'd been upset to lose her blanket. During a working lunch where he usually read emails while eating, he instead found himself staring at the carefully mended corner and wondering who had taken the time to repair it. It bothered him that he was so affected by such a small gesture. He'd trained himself not to be moved by sentiment, to see everything through the lens of logic and utility. Emotion was weakness. Attachment was danger. These were the rules he'd lived by for 20 years. But that little girl hadn't been following any rules. She'd just been kind because kindness was natural to her, as natural as breathing. That evening, Marcus did something unusual. Instead of working through dinner, he called down to the building's concierge. "I need information about the cleaning service," he said. "Specifically, I need to know about the woman who was here last night with a child." Within an hour, he had the information. Elena Rodriguez, single mother, worked 2 jobs to support herself and her daughter Sophia. 27 years old, no criminal record, excellent references. The cleaning company supervisor had noted that Elena sometimes brought her daughter on night jobs because she couldn't afford childcare, but that the child was always well-behaved and never disturbed anything. Until last night, Marcus thought with the ghost of a smile. He looked at the blanket again, then made a decision that surprised him. He picked up his phone and called his assistant, who was used to strange requests, but even she seemed taken aback by this one. "I need you to order a replacement blanket," Marcus said. "I'll send you a photo. Make sure it's exactly the same size, same design, everything. Also," he hesitated, then continued, "order a high-quality version too. The best children's blanket money can buy." "Sir, just do it, please. I need them both delivered tonight." After he hung up, Marcus sat alone in his office, watching the sun set over Manhattan. The city sparkled as lights began to appear in windows, millions of people living their lives, loving and losing, and trying to find their way through the world. And somewhere out there was a little girl who had given him her most precious possession because she thought he looked cold. Marcus had spent his entire adult life accumulating things, companies, properties, investments. But in that moment, he realized that a child's worn blanket meant more to him than any of it. He just didn't understand why yet. Elena was changing Sophia into her pajamas when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, and her first instinct was to ignore it, probably a telemarketer. But something made her answer. "Ms. Rodriguez?" A crisp, professional voice asked. "This is Jennifer Kim, assistant to Marcus Chin. Mr. Chin would like to speak with you. Could you hold for a moment?" Elena's blood ran cold. This was it. He was calling to fire her, possibly to sue her for allowing Sophia to touch him. Her mind raced with panic. She couldn't lose this job. She needed it desperately. "Ms. Rodriguez?" A different voice now, deeper, male. "This is Marcus Chin. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time."
"No, sir."
"I mean, this is fine. I'm so sorry about last night. My daughter, she didn't mean any harm. She was just—" "Ms. Rodriguez, please. You're not in trouble." There was a pause. "I'm calling because your daughter left something in my office. A blanket. I'd like to return it to her." Elena closed her eyes in relief. "Oh, thank goodness. I've been looking everywhere for it. Sophia has been upset all day. That blanket, it was a gift from her grandmother before she passed. It means everything to her." Another pause, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I see. That makes what happened even more significant. I really am sorry, Mr. Chin. It won't happen again. Actually, I was hoping it might." The words came out in a rush, as if he'd surprised himself. "I mean, I was wondering if you and Sophia might come to dinner. Here at the penthouse. Tomorrow night, if you're available. I'd like to return the blanket personally and, well, I'd like to meet her properly." Elena was speechless. This had to be some kind of test or trick. Billionaires didn't invite their cleaning staff to dinner. "Ms. Rodriguez? I don't understand." "Neither do I, entirely." Marcus laughed, and it sounded rusty, like he didn't do it often. "But your daughter did something kind for me, and I'd like to say thank you. No strings attached. Just dinner. And I promise I'm not some kind of creep. You can bring a friend if it would make you more comfortable. Or we could meet in a restaurant if you'd prefer." Elena's protective instincts warred with her curiosity. There was something in his voice, a loneliness that resonated with her own. She thought about Sophia, who had cried herself to sleep the night before, clutching a stuffed bear instead of her beloved blanket. She thought about the sad expression she'd seen on Marcus Chen's sleeping face. "What time?" she heard herself say. 7 o'clock? I'll have food brought in. Does Sophia have any allergies or food she doesn't like? She's 3. She likes chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. Chicken nuggets and mac and cheese it is." Another pause. "Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez, for agreeing to come, and for raising such a thoughtful daughter." After she hung up, Elena sat on Sophia's bed, watching her daughter sleep. What had she just agreed to? This was probably a terrible idea. But something told her that Marcus Chin needed this dinner as much as Sophia needed her blanket back. Maybe more. The next evening, Elena dressed Sophia in her best outfit, a yellow dress with white flowers that Elena's mother had bought for her birthday. She tried to talk herself out of going at least a dozen times, but Sophia's excitement when she learned they were going to see the sad working man again had made it impossible to cancel. "Will he like the picture I made him?" Sophia asked in the elevator up to the penthouse, clutching a crayon drawing of a stick figure sleeping under a rainbow. "I'm sure he will, baby." The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and Marcus Chin was waiting for them. He was dressed casually, jeans and a sweater, which somehow made him seem more intimidating than a business suit would have. He was tall and handsome in a severe way, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. But when he knelt down to Sophia's level, his entire expression softened. "Hello, Sophia," he said gently. "I believe this belongs to you." He held out not one but 2 blankets. The first was her original blanket, freshly cleaned. The second was identical but new, the pink hearts and unicorns bright and vibrant. Sophia's eyes went wide. "My blanket. And a twin." She threw her arms around Marcus's neck in a spontaneous hug that made him freeze in surprise. Elena moved to pull her back, but Marcus held up a hand. "It's okay," he said quietly. His arms came up slowly to return the hug, and Elena saw his eyes close for just a moment. When Sophia pulled back, there was something raw in his expression. "Thank you for taking care of me," he said to Sophia. No one has done that in a very long time. You're welcome. I made you a picture too. Sophia thrust the drawing at him. Marcus took it like it was a priceless artifact, studying every crayon mark. This is beautiful. Is this me? Yes. You were sleeping under a rainbow. Rainbows come after rain. Mommy says they mean good things are coming. Your mommy is a wise woman. Marcus looked up at Elena for the first time, really looked at her, and she felt her breath catch. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting us. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Marcus had indeed ordered chicken nuggets and mac and cheese for Sophia, along with a spread of other foods for the adults. He'd also cleared a coffee table and set out paper and crayons for Sophia to draw with. As they ate, Sophia chattered away, telling Marcus about her preschool, her stuffed animals, and how her mommy worked very hard. Marcus listened with an intensity that Elena found both touching and slightly unsettling, as if he was trying to memorize every word. You're a good listener, Elena observed when Sophia was distracted with her drawing. I spend most of my time talking, Marcus admitted. Negotiating, directing, commanding. I'd forgotten how nice it is to just listen, especially to someone who's so honest. She just says what she thinks. That can be dangerous in the adult world. That's the tragedy, isn't it? Marcus watched Sophia draw, his expression wistful. We train it out of them. The honesty, the kindness, the ability to see when someone needs help and just help them. We teach them to be careful, strategic, guarded. We teach them to protect themselves, Elena said softly. The world isn't always kind. No, Marcus agreed. It isn't. Sophia brought over her newest drawing, a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands under a sun. This is you and Mommy and me, she announced. We're a team. Marcus took the drawing, and Elena saw his hand tremble slightly. A team, he repeated. I like that. As the evening wore on, Elena found herself relaxing. Marcus was nothing like she'd expected. He was awkward around Sophia at first, as if he'd forgotten how to talk to children, but he tried so hard to connect with her that it was endearing. And when he talked to Elena, he didn't talk down to her or make her feel less than. He asked about her life with genuine interest, and he listened to her answers like they mattered. She's changed me already, Marcus said as they watched Sophia play with her blankets on the floor, wrapping her stuffed bear in them. One night, one gesture, and I can't stop thinking about it. About her. About what kind of person she must have to be so young and already so compassionate. She learned from her grandmother, Elena said. My mother always said that kindness costs nothing, but means everything. Sophia took that to heart. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. I wish she could see Sophia now. Marcus was quiet for a moment. My mother died when I was 12. I still miss her every day. They shared a look of understanding. The grief that never quite leaves, the hole that can't be filled. Mr. Chen. Marcus, please. Marcus, why did you really invite us here? He considered the question, his gaze on Sophia. Because when I woke up with that blanket on me, it was the first time in 20 years that I felt like someone saw me. Not my money, not my company, not what I could do for them. Just me, a tired person who needed some warmth. He turned to Elena. And because I've been alone for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. Your daughter reminded me, and I didn't want to let that feeling go. Elena's heart ached for him. She recognized that loneliness. She'd felt it herself, lying awake at night after putting Sophia to bed, wondering if she'd ever find someone to share her life with. You don't have to be alone, she said gently. I don't know how to be anything else anymore. Sophia appeared between them, holding both blankets. Marcus, do you have a blanket for when you're sad? No, I don't think I do. Sophia considered this, then handed him the new blanket. You can have this one. Mommy says sharing is caring. Marcus took the blanket, clearly moved. Sophia, this is yours. I gave it to you. But you gave me 2. So I can share one. That way we both have magic blankets. Magic blankets? They keep away the lonely, Sophia said with complete seriousness. When you're sad or lonely, you wrap up in your magic blanket and remember that someone loves you. Marcus looked at Elena over Sophia's head, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you, he whispered. Both of you. For the blanket, for the picture, for coming tonight. For reminding me what warmth feels like. When it was time to leave, Sophia hugged Marcus goodbye, and this time he was ready for it, hugging her back without hesitation. Can we come back? Sophia asked. You're my friend now. Marcus looked to Elena, hope and uncertainty in his expression. She found herself nodding. We'd like that, she said. Friends should spend time together. As the elevator doors closed, Elena saw Marcus standing in his penthouse, holding Sophia's blanket and her crayon drawing, looking less like a billionaire and more like a man who'd just been given something precious beyond measure. And in her heart, Elena knew that this was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, something unexpected bloomed in the sterile elegance of Marcus's penthouse: warmth. It started small. Marcus invited Elena and Sophia to dinner again the following week, then the week after that. He claimed he wanted to return the favor for Sophia's kindness, but Elena suspected it was more than that. She saw how his face lit up when Sophia came bounding through the door, how he'd started keeping crayons and paper at the ready, how he listened with genuine fascination to every 3-year-old observation about the world. For her part, Sophia had adopted Marcus completely. She called him her Marcus and talked about him constantly at preschool. She drew him pictures that he displayed on his refrigerator, like they were Picasso's. She told him stories and asked him questions and treated him with the casual affection she showed to everyone she loved. And slowly, carefully, Marcus began to change. It happened in small ways at first. He started leaving work at 6 o'clock instead of midnight, rushing home to have dinner with Elena and Sophia on their designated evenings. He stopped checking his phone during meals because Sophia had once asked him sadly, "Don't you like talking to us?" The wounded look on his face had been answer enough, and the phone had stayed in his pocket ever since. He learned to braid hair after Sophia asked if he could do pigtails like her friend's daddy did. He watched YouTube videos for an hour, practiced on a doll Elena brought, and the look of pride on his face when he finally managed 2 crooked but serviceable braids made Elena's heart squeeze. He cleared out one of his spare rooms, previously a storage space for expensive furniture he never used, and turned it into a playroom. It started with a few toys, then a bookshelf, then a small table for coloring. Sophia cried happy tears when she saw it, and Marcus had to turn away to hide his own emotional response. "She's not your daughter," Elena had reminded him gently one evening after Sophia had fallen asleep on his couch, exhausted from playing. She'd meant it as a reality check, not a criticism, but Marcus had looked at her with such raw longing that she'd immediately regretted saying it. "I know," he'd said quietly, carefully moving Sophia's curls out of her face. "But I'd like to be in her life, if you'll let me. As a friend." I don't know what. "I just know that she makes me want to be better. To be the kind of person who deserves to have someone care whether he's cold and tired." Elena had nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The truth was, Marcus had become important to both of them. Elena had been alone since Sophia's father left, carrying the weight of parenthood and financial stress without anyone to share it with. Her mother had been her support system, and when she died, Elena had felt that weight double. She'd learned to be strong because she had no choice, to keep moving forward because stopping meant failing Sophia. But with Marcus, she felt like she could breathe. He didn't just care about Sophia, he cared about Elena too. He asked about her day, her dreams, her struggles. When her car broke down and she couldn't afford repairs, he'd offer to help with a loan, structured so carefully that it felt less like charity and more like what friends did for each other. When she caught a terrible flu, he'd shown up with soup and children's videos to keep Sophia entertained, completely comfortable spending his Saturday caring for a sick woman and her hyperactive daughter. "Why are you doing all this?" Elena had asked him once, genuinely curious. They were sitting in his living room after Sophia had gone to sleep, sharing tea and comfortable silence. Marcus had thought about it for a long time before answering. Do you know what I did the day after Sophia gave me her blanket? I went to a board meeting and listened to executives argue for 2 hours about market share and profit margins. And all I could think about was that little girl who saw a stranger and thought only about making sure he wasn't cold. He'd smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I've spent 20 years in rooms where everyone wants something from me. They see my money, my influence, my connections. But Sophia just saw a person. And you. He'd looked at Elena then, really looked at her. You see me too. Not the billionaire. Just Marcus. Just Marcus is pretty great, Elena had said softly. His hand had found hers in the space between them on the couch. So are you. So is Sophia. You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. Their relationship shifted after that night, becoming something deeper than friendship but undefined, existing in that tender space between what was and what might be. Marcus never pushed, never demanded, but his feelings were written in every gesture. The way he remembered that Elena liked her coffee with cream and sugar, the way he made sure there were always fresh flowers in the apartment because she'd once mentioned loving them, the way he looked at her when she laughed. For Elena, falling for Marcus was terrifying. She'd been hurt before, abandoned before. She had Sophia to think about. But it was also inevitable, like watching the sun rise. You could close your eyes, but it was happening whether you acknowledged it or not. Marcus was kind and thoughtful, and trying so hard to learn how to be part of their lives. How could she not love him for that? Sophia, with the uncomplicated wisdom of children, saw what the adults were dancing around. Marcus loves us, she announced one day, while Elena was brushing her hair. He's our friend, sweetie. No, Mommy. He loves us like family loves. Like Abuela loved us. Sophia turned to look at her mother with serious eyes. And you love him too. I can tell. Elena's heart raced. What makes you say that? You smile different when he's here. Happy smiles. And he smiles different too. Like he was waiting his whole life to smile that way. Out of the mouths of babes, Elena thought. Sophia wasn't wrong. That evening, after Sophia was asleep in the playroom, which had gradually acquired a toddler bed because she stayed over so often, Marcus and Elena stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering city. She asked me today what I would wish for if I could wish for anything, Marcus said quietly. I told her I'd wish for more time. More dinners, more drawings, more bedtime stories. You can have those things, Elena said. We're not going anywhere. Marcus turned to face her, and Elena saw vulnerability in his expression that took her breath away. Elena, I need to tell you something. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I already have fallen. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you've built a beautiful life for Sophia despite all the obstacles. I love how you see the good in people, even in someone like me who forgot how to be human. He took her hands in his. And I love Sophia like she was my own daughter. I know I have no right to feel that way. I know I'm just the guy who happened to be sleeping in an office when she walked in. But she changed my life, Elena. You both did. Tears streamed down Elena's face. Marcus. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens, whatever you decide, I need you to know that you and Sophia gave me back my heart. And I'll be grateful for that for the rest of my life. Elena reached up and cupped his face in her hands. You impossible, wonderful man. Did it never occur to you that we fell in love with you too? The kiss, when it came, was gentle and sweet and tasted like tears and hope. When they pulled apart, Marcus was smiling, a real smile, the kind that transformed his entire face. So, what do we do now? He asked. Now, Elena said, we stop pretending we're just friends and start being what we already are. A family. From the doorway of the playroom, neither of them noticed Sophia peeking out, a satisfied smile on her face before she snuggled back under her magic blanket. Her work here was done. 6 months later, the penthouse had transformed into something Marcus never imagined it could be, a home. Sophia's drawings covered the refrigerator and marched down the hallway in colorful frames. The minimalist furniture had been joined by comfortable pieces that invited sitting, reading, living. The spare room that had been Sophia's playroom was now officially her bedroom, decorated with stars on the ceiling that glowed at night, and shelves full of books that Marcus read to her before bed. The master bedroom, once Marcus's solitary domain, now held evidence of Elena's presence, her books on the nightstand, her photos on the dresser, her laughter echoing through rooms that had known only silence. They'd moved in officially 3 months ago, after many long conversations about what it meant, how to make it work, what they were building together. Marcus had wanted to rush, to bind them to him immediately, but Elena had wisely pumped the brakes. "We're already a family in our hearts," she'd said. "The rest is just paperwork and logistics. Let's do this right, for Sophia's sake." So they'd gone to therapy together to make sure they were building on a solid foundation and not just the intensity of new love. They'd talked to lawyers about how to protect everyone's interests. They'd been intentional and careful and honest about their fears and hopes. And through it all, Sophia had been their North Star, reminding them with every hug and giggle what they were doing this for. Marcus had met Elena's extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins who'd welcomed him with cautious warmth that turned genuine when they saw how he was with Sophia. He'd attended his first family barbecue, his first quinceañera, his first chaotic holiday dinner where everyone talked over each other and love was loud and messy and real. For a man who'd spent holidays alone or at business dinners, it was overwhelming and wonderful. "You're part of the family now," Elena's aunt had told him, patting his cheek. "That means you don't get to be lonely anymore. We're loud and we're all in your business, but we show up. For weddings and funerals and everything in between." Marcus had excused himself to the bathroom and cried, great, gasping sobs of relief that he'd finally found his way home. His business associates noticed the change in him. Marcus Chen, the ruthless negotiator, had become someone who left meetings early for school events, who turned down deals that would require too much travel, who talked openly about his family and kept their pictures on his desk. Some thought he'd gone soft. Some thought he'd lost his edge. But his company's numbers told a different story. Profits were up, employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and Marcus's leadership team reported that he'd become more creative and strategic, not less. "Happy people make better decisions," his therapist had explained. "You're not diminished by love. You're enhanced by it." On a Tuesday evening in spring, Marcus came home to find Elena and Sophia in the kitchen, baking cookies and wearing matching aprons he'd bought them as a joke gift. They were covered in flour. The kitchen was a disaster, and Marcus thought he'd never seen anything more beautiful. "Marcus!" Sophia shrieked, running to him with floury hands. He scooped her up without hesitation. "Designer suit be damned. What are we making?" "Heart cookies. For you. Because you're part of our heart family." Elena caught his eye over Sophia's head and smiled. Heart family was Sophia's term for the people she loved most, and hearing himself included never got old. Later, after Sophia was asleep and they'd cleaned the kitchen together, Marcus and Elena sat on the balcony, watching the city lights. He had his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side. "Do you ever miss it?" Elena asked quietly. "The before. When it was just you and your work and everything was simple?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Everything was clear: work, succeed, acquire, repeat. There was no ambiguity, no vulnerability." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But I don't miss the emptiness. I don't miss being alone. I don't miss the version of myself who thought that building walls was the same as building a life." "Sophia calls you her daddy now," Elena said, to her friends at preschool. "I heard her yesterday. My daddy is picking me up today." She looked up at him. "How do you feel about that?" Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Honored, terrified, grateful, all of it. He turned to face her fully. "Elena, I want to make it official. I want to adopt Sophia if you'll let me. And I want to marry you if you'll have me. I know we've only been together 6 months, and I know it's fast, but..." Elena pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "Yes." "Yes to which part?" "Yes to all of it. Yes to adoption. Yes to marriage. Yes to this life we're building together." She took his hand and placed it over her heart. You gave us security and stability, yes. But more than that, you gave us yourself. The real you, not the armor you wore for the world. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." They kissed as the city sparkled around them. Two people who'd found each other through the unlikeliest of circumstances, a tired billionaire and a struggling single mother, brought together by a 3-year-old with a worn pink blanket and a heart full of compassion. The wedding was small, held in the penthouse with Elena's family and a few of Marcus's business associates who'd become genuine friends. Sophia was the flower girl, taking her role very seriously as she scattered petals down the makeshift aisle. When it came time for vows, Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with Sophia first. "Sophia, I promise to always be there for you. To read you bedtime stories and help with homework and teach you that you can be anything you want to be. I promise to love your mother with everything I have. And I promise to never forget that you saved me, not with money or power, but with a blanket and a heart that saw someone in need and chose kindness." His voice broke. "Thank you for teaching me what family means." Sophia threw her arms around his neck. "You're welcome, Daddy." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. When he stood to face Elena, Marcus had to take a moment to compose himself. "I was lost when you found me. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. I had everything and nothing. I was successful and empty. And then a little girl put a blanket on my shoulders and everything changed." He took Elena's hands. "You didn't just let me into your family. You taught me how to be part of one. How to show up, how to be present, how to love without holding back. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that gift." Elena's vows were simpler, but no less profound. "I promise to remind you, every single day, that you're more than what you accomplish. You're the man who learned to braid hair from YouTube videos. The man who reads The Very Hungry Caterpillar with voices. The man who shows up over and over with his whole heart. That's who you are, Marcus. That's who I love." 6 months after the wedding, the adoption was finalized. Sophia Chin officially became their daughter in the eyes of the law, though she'd been their daughter in every way that mattered since that first dinner. On the anniversary of the night Sophia had placed her blanket on Marcus's shoulders, they established a tradition. Every year on that date, they would each give away a blanket to someone who needed warmth, not just physical warmth, but the warmth of human kindness and connection. They donated to homeless shelters, women's refuges, hospitals, anywhere people might be cold and alone. And with each blanket, they included a note. "You are seen. You are valued. You are not alone." It was Sophia's idea, naturally. "Magic blankets should be shared," she'd said. "So everyone can remember someone loves them." Marcus's therapist later told him that what Sophia had given him that night wasn't just a blanket, it was permission. Permission to be vulnerable, to need care, to accept help. Permission to be human. "You spent 20 years building walls to protect yourself from pain," the therapist said. "A 3-year-old girl took them down in 3 seconds. Not because she was strong enough to break them, but because she offered you something better than walls. She offered you connection." Standing in his living room years later, Marcus watched Elena help a now 7-year-old Sophia with her homework while a 2-year-old boy, their son, Daniel, played with blocks on the floor. The penthouse rang with noise and life and love. His phone buzzed with work emails that could wait until tomorrow. His calendar was full of parent-teacher conferences and birthday parties and family dinners. His heart, once closed and guarded, was wide open and full. He still kept that original pink blanket, though. It was carefully preserved in a frame on his office wall, along with Sophia's first drawing, the stick figure sleeping under a rainbow. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "The day my real life began." Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, Marcus would stand in front of that framed blanket and remember the man he'd been, brilliant but lonely, successful but empty, surrounded by wealth but starving for warmth. And then he'd walk down the hall to check on his children, kiss his sleeping wife, and feel gratitude so profound it brought him to his knees. Sophia had been right all along. The blanket was magic. Not because it kept away the cold, but because it had taught him the most important lesson of his life, that even the smallest gesture of kindness can change everything. That being vulnerable enough to accept care is just as important as being strong enough to give it. That family isn't about blood or obligation, but about showing up with an open heart and choosing, every single day, to stay. Marcus had spent 32 years learning how to succeed in business. A 3-year-old girl had taught him, in one night, how to succeed at life. And he would spend the rest of his days making sure that no one in his family ever slept alone and cold again. Because he finally understood what Sophia had known all along, warmth isn't measured in degrees. It's measured in love.